Next up is Italy. This was legitimately almost as hard as Taiwan. This was a really difficult country to round out. I just threw Sloppy in there first of all, because I'm pretty sure he was basically the best player in Italy, or at least top two, top three, top four, before he moved to North America. And while he didn't have the best showing on Tempo Storm, I think he was still, good enough. Like, not being great inside the NAL, I think for Italy is still pretty good. So we're definitely throwing Sloppy on. Very flexible from what he showed on Tempo Storm, so I kind of did keep his roles open. I settled on putting him support for attack and then flex for defense. Again, just the fact that he can be so flexible, I think will be huge for his team there. Then I'm going with Gina. I believe it's pronounced Gen 3. Gina. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it. From Mako. Again, the Italian finals were a little while ago, and so they've changed rosters quite a bit. Gina was the only one that actually was Italian, played in the Italian Grand Finals, and like stayed on the roster. So I'm just kind of hoping that he's a strong player. He seemed fine in the finals. Put him on entry. Put him on Rome. Yep. And then I went with T3B from Mako. Again, he didn't play in those finals, but he was Italian. I'll put him on second entry behind Gina, and I'll let him roam with Gina because again, he's got these he's Gina's duo in his bio, and he's 18 years old. So I'm just assuming he's a good fragger and he can work well with Gina. So I put him on the same roles as Gina, and I let him frag. I have no idea if that's a good pick. I've never seen this guy play, never seen a highlight, never seen a stat from a match he's played. I'm just hoping with this one. And then again, my knowledge of the Italian scene is not great, so I just went for two players from IGP, which was the second place Italian team. They got absolutely rolled in the grand finals, so it might have even been smarter just to go with like some of the players that got cut from the Samsung Morning Stars, which was the team that became Mako. But nevertheless, I went with IGP players. I went with Happy Simo and Brodello. Happy Simo was the top fragging player for their team in the finals. So boom, he's getting slid on in. I'm going to put him as a flank watch and as an anchor. And Brodello, he played Smoke and Hard Breach. So we needed a Smoke and Hard Breach player. I threw him into the roster. Again, Italy was a hard country for me to figure out. So that might not be the best team that I've assembled, but it's what we've got. Next up is my personal favorite. No bias here, but it's Team Canada. Got Canadian, Fox 8, Jarvis, Silent, and Quartz. This is what I submitted to CGG. It's not what I tweeted about, but again, there's a little bit more thought put into this. I did go for the three US division players of Canadian, Fox, and Jarvis. Canadian, I think, is that IGL world-class player for Space Station Gaming. He's a must-pick. Fox as well, poor recent results, but I don't think it matters enough. Canada's not a deep player pool, right? So you kind of have to go with what you've got, and I think Fox A is more than comfortable for us to bring him. Fox usually plays that second entry on Sledge and stuff, but I've put him on support. I've put him on anchor as well. So again, with these Canadian players, I'm asking them to be a little bit flexible, but I think Fox will be able to do it. Then we'll bring in Jarvis, who's playing for Tempo Storm right now. Really flexible player, really strong player. I put him on Flank Watch, which is a role he played a little bit on PogChamp. And I've put him on like support for defense. I hope he can play Smoke. I've never seen him play Smoke, but I hope he can. And then for Mirage, Silent, and Quartz. Again, these are two really young, really good fraggers for Mirage. Quartz, I think, was the best player for Mirage, best player in Canada Division. I'd be really excited to see him play on the Canadian national team. And then Silent is just sort of that big fragger, that entry player who works well with Quartz. They've got that chemistry. I'd let them go wild, both on entry and on Rome. I'd have Quartz bringing in those sledge rolls and playing more second entry, because that's sort of where he plays on Mirage. So keep that duo together. I think the Canadian team could do really well. I think this is like, the roles are obviously a little bit weird for some of these players like Fox and Jarvis, but these are world-class players. I think this is a team that could absolutely go farther than people expect in the World Cup, but I'm also hugely biased. Next, we got Spain. Spain's a bit of a tough one, but not too bad, honestly. I thought it'd be a lot harder than it was to pick these players out. Let's start with the obvious one. Goga, world champion, best player in Spain by a mile, plays for Vitality. This one just makes the most amount of sense, I think. Throw Goga in. Give him his roles from Vitality. Like, let him play Hard Breach. Let him play Anchor. He was pretty flexible. when he played for Vitality this season. Just looking back at some of the stats from their matches, he seemed like a player who could play many different roles. So hopefully that will help out. And if I gotten the roles wrong for any of these other players, Goga could move around a bit. I went with 2 Heretics players and 2 Movistar Riders players. Those are just the top 2 teams from Spain. There's no real Spanish players in any other team that I could find, so that's basically where the logic comes in from that. Heretics, I went Baroz and Juke. Apologies again if I'm pronouncing any of these names wrong. Baroz was the best player in the Spanish finals. Juke was the second best player in the Spanish finals. Just seemed like easy picks. Baroz I've put on entry and I put on flex role for the defense, whereas Juke I've put on flank watch and I put him on the roam. So both will have opportunities to frag. Both can keep things pretty flexible as well. Again, if they need to move around, Goga's there to help them out a bit. Movistar Riders, this one was a little bit more difficult. I went with Scythe, first of all. He did well in the grand finals, and his roles seemed to fit well with what we were looking for the rest of this roster. So I went with him first. I've got him second entry, playing that sledge, and then I've got him more as a roamer as well, so he can flex those fragging muscles. And then I went with Wesker. Doesn't fit the roles I've given him too well, but he seemed like a good player. So I went with that rather than the roles for him. And I've put him on support, and I've put him on support. So he's playing that Thatcher, playing that Smoke. Again, I didn't see him play all those roles, but hopefully he can adapt a little bit more, and he can move around with Goga. Worst case scenario, right? Then we've got Germany, another favorite, I would say, to come out of Europe. This one was relatively easy. I started with Aces, one of the best players in the regular season. Again, did not have a great major. Nobody on Rogue did. But, his frags were so good in the regular season, you couldn't not pick up Aces. Then I went with Prono from Team Secret. Sort of a similar situation to Aces. I mean, Secret was less successful than Rogue by a significant amount, but Prono was putting up those stats, and he had really good numbers in his frags, right up there with Aces. So I thought Prono was a safe pick, and I'd be happy to see him playing on the German team. Ended up putting Aces on entry and roam, and Prono on flex roam. Then I was allowed one more Rogue player, one more Secret player, and one player just not on either of those 2 teams, and there are a couple Germans floating around the European League, so I had some options there. I went with Rips for my third pick, another very good player, especially on his roles, playing that hard breach, playing that support. Not a roles where you find really skilled players, but Rips seems like he does those and gets his frags, which is really nice to see. Fits in really well with this roster. Not a lot of other German players that filled in those roles. Then I went with Dram. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. I'm sorry. From Team Secret. Put him on second entry to frag alongside Aces, and I put him on anchor for defense. Again, just fills those roles that we were looking for, and did pretty well in the regular season. So he would be my pick for the 4th roster slot. And the 5th spot was the hardest spot to fill, but I ended up going with Hungary from Team Vitality. I could have gone with other players and players that had done better inside the EUL and players that were German, but I felt like Hungary's roles fit the best, and I was willing to go for Hungary, even though he had a little bit worse stats and a little bit worse showing in the regular season, because I think he's still quite a good player. He fills in that support role, and then he can go and be a flex player on defense. Just does round out the team really, really well, and he's been kind of a legacy player. He's been in the game for a while, so I'd be excited to see Hungary play. 2 more to go. We've got Japan coming up second last. This one was difficult because, again, I didn't really watch much of the regular season, and in the major, Japan did really bad. They had 3 teams, but they all lost, except for the one time where the 2 Japanese teams went against each other. So this was challenging, but combing through the stats of the regular season and through the major, I think I've got a pretty good list. My first pick was Anaton. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Anaton. For Cyclops, big shield player, but he seems like he can frag like nuts as well. I put him on entry, and I've put him on anchor. Can help out the team quite a bit. I then went for 2 different Fav players, Chloroform and Typon. Both were really flexible. Fav roles kind of confused me, to be honest. But I hope that these players both seem like they could frag. And that's honestly what I was looking for this roster. So Give it to both of them. Chloroform, I put on support, so Thatcher Smoke, more or less. And Typhon I put on flex, so flank watch flex, whatever you want to call it. Again, they can move around a lot, play the different roles that they played on Fav, play together a little bit, and hopefully produce some results. Then I looked at, I knew I'd have to get probably one Guts player, and then either a Guts player or a Cyclops player. I went 2 Guts players, even though Cyclops did finish the best. There was nobody that stuck out to me other than Anaton that I wanted to bring onto this roster. So I went with Papillon, and I went with Yura. Papillon's obviously a name that has been around in the scene for a long time. Pretty established players. I thought those roles fit this team really well because he's got that sledge player being locked in, and then he can be that really strong roamer as well. We needed some roamers on this roster. So looks really good to fill out this roster. And then Yura as well was the next one from Guts. A good roamer. You know, Hard Breach is a bit of a stretch. I have to kind of give him that Hard Breach role alongside the roamer role, but I got faith he can pull it off. You know, he did seem like one of the stronger players inside of Guts. So yeah, give him a chance on some unique roles. And again, some of those other players are pretty flexible, so I'd be fine throwing him on this roster. And then last but certainly not least, one of my favorite regions out of APAC, South Korea. So this one, you obviously want 2 Cloud9 players, but I decided to look at the lower level teams first to sort of pick out some key players that I wanted, because Cloud9 to me feels like a team that is pretty spread out in their skill, right? There's no one player that really carries Cloud9. So the first team I looked at was actually Talon, and I thought that Tomorrow was the big player that I wanted to grab from that roster. You know, you put him on the fragging roles, you put him on flex, and then you put him on that roaming role as well on defense. He's the best player on Talon. He gets the big frags. You want to have him on this roster, so I made sure to bring him along. Then I went for BD, and this was one I actually considered after looking at the Cloud9 players. Mostly just fills in those roles really well. He's going to be playing on Hard Breach. He's going to be playing on support. Not necessarily the biggest fragger, but again, will hopefully work well with Tomorrow, and can be brought up a little bit by the other really strong Korean players that are on this roster. Then we look at Cloud9, and this was kind of tough. This was really tough, actually, to pick out 2 players that I wanted from C9. I went with Envy Taylor and Sael. I hope I'm pronouncing that second name correctly. Envy Taylor is probably the best player from Cloud9. You know, I said there's not one player that carries them, but I think he's probably the closest that it gets. Just a smart fragger. You know, I put him on entry. I put him on flex for defense. Seems like he could really do well on the squad. And then I got Sael. Largely because I felt like he plays really well with Envy Taylor. Those two as a duo in the major seemed like they were working quite well together. So I put him on second entry. I put him on roam as well. And I think he would do quite well. I would really like to see those two stick as a duo, considering you only take 2 from Cloud9. I think those are probably the 2 I'd want to go with. And then I had to pick somebody from Scars. Scars does not seem like a particularly good team. Not that I've watched them much. I shouldn't judge a team too harshly before I watch their games. But I went with Yaz for Scars. He fills in the final roles pretty well, and he does, you know, have a little bit of flexibility to him. I gave Sael the second entry role, but he doesn't really play a lot of sledge, so Yaz can kind of pick up that if needed. I did give him support for attack and anchor for defense, kind of similar to BD, sort of just like fills in these rosters. Korea, this team seems a little bit more top heavy than some of the other regions we've seen, so maybe we'll be a little bit reliant on like Tomorrow and Envy Taylor. But I still think that these 2 players, these 2 support players at the end, would round out the roster really nicely and give us a good, strong Korean team. And that's it for the World Cup video. It was pretty long. I might break it up into 2. We'll see. We'll see what it ends up coming out to. Whether it was one video or you just got done watching 2, though, I do hope you enjoyed. If I got your country totally wrong, let me know. If you like the picks, let me know. If you want to see more of these types of videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Rainbow Six North American League is back at twitch.tv/Rainbow Six every Monday, and Wednesdays the US division is on, and then Canada division is on Fridays. So make sure you check all of that out. You can also catch me streaming at twitch.tv/JessieJChick. I'm live about once a week, similar to these YouTube videos, and it's a good time. You should come hang out. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next video.
I can't disagree with that, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, there's just so much utter bullshit that wrestling gets away with that I think just everyone else could if they leaned into it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, they had Hornswoggle. We have Doki.
Yeah.
Already, there's the comparison.
There you go.
I mean, they had who's that? Oh, there's a wrestler in AEW, and I'm forgetting what his name is, but basically he just fights with his hands in his pockets. Like his hands never come out of his pockets.
Orange Cassidy, I think.
Yes, thank you.
And E United do the same thing.
Yeah.
So you got your comparison there.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, E United is the jobber of Siege. All right, that's fair. That's
Bro. That's
Oh.
cruel.
I was a little mean.
That's-
Sorry.
Except he's not a job, dude. People love his shtick. That's the thing. He was